Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics. Start small, build big. This is the key concept behind many civilization building games, whether more realistic titles like Sid Meier's Civilization itself, or something that has you taking to the stars and conquering entire worlds. There have been many different visions about how to do this genre, but what if you don't have several hours to dedicate to a 4X? What if you and your friends want to sit down and play through that same experience in about an hour? Hello everyone, I'm Adam the Fanatic, also known as Mario Fanatic 15, and welcome to my first, but certainly not last, tabletop review. Today I'm going to be looking at Tiny Epic Kingdoms by Gamelyn Games. As you've likely already figured out, I'm using a combination of physical and digital as I take a look not only at the ultra-tiny version of the game, but also at the Tabletop Simulator DLC. This will allow me to compare the original and ultra-tiny versions, as well as the quality of the DLC itself. For those that are unaware, Tiny Epic is a series of games by Scott Adams. They all play completely differently from one another, but fit into these small boxes, which are in turn stuffed to the brim with components. In essence, they're budget games, meant to feel like full $50 to $60 titles, but in a much smaller package, and likewise at a much lower price tag. The Tiny Epic series is currently 9 titles strong, with the 10th recently finishing a Kickstarter. In addition, 3 of these games have been given expansions, and 2 have had these ultra-tiny remakes. Don't be fooled by the fact that they're the size of a normal deck of playing cards. These are actually full games. And with only one exception, the rules in Ultra Tiny Epic Kingdoms are identical to the original. As aforementioned, we'll be taking a look at Tiny Epic Kingdoms in particular today. Tiny Epic Kingdoms is an action selection game for 2 to 5 players wherein you'll compete to collect victory points by constructing a mighty tower, raising a massive army, pursuing research to make use of your faction's unique traits, or by managing to control cities at the end of the game. At the onset, you'll take on the role of one of 16 factions, which for the most part are pretty typical high fantasy fare. Humans, elves, dwarves, goblins, merfolk, and satyrs, just to name a few. You'll have 7 armies, a research tracker, a tower tracker, 3 resource trackers, and a war die. In the ultra-tiny version, you'll simply have these cubes that match your player color to represent most of these, while resource trackers match the color of the resource in question. You'll also have a card that's used to replace the resource tokens, as well as a track that replaces the war die. In the original version, you'll simply have a resource track along the edge of your faction card. You begin by placing 2 of your armies in any one region on your starting territory. Then you take 6 resources. The game recommends first-timers take 1 ore, 2 mana, and 3 food, though you may take any combination you wish, or even take 6 of one and none of the rest if you so desire. The game is played over a number of rounds which consists of 5 actions. Players will each get to choose an action in turn, then each other player in clockwise order has the option of either taking that action or harvesting resources. Assuming the endgame has not been triggered, and once all 5 actions have been taken, the order markers are cleared and a new round begins. The first 2 actions you can take are kind of like opposite sides of the same coin. Patrol allows you to move any army to an adjacent region in the same territory. Meanwhile, Quest allows you to take any army on an outside edge of a territory card, move it to any other region that is on the outside edge of a different territory card. Keep in mind that you can never have more than 2 armies in a space at any time. If 2 enemy armies end up in the same space, then a war begins. I'll explain combat in a bit once I'm finished going over the various actions. The third action a player can choose is Build. Building allows a player to spend ore in order to construct their tower, with higher levels costing more ore to erect. This has no immediate effect on the game, but when the endgame is reached, the player can earn as many as 10 victory points for their tower. The fourth action available is Research. My personal favorite, Research is what allows you to unlock your faction's unique abilities by paying mana, once again increasing cost with each level. This is what gives each faction its own unique playstyle. Human Research focuses on trading and resource collection, whereas Elves focus on getting the most out of mana. Similarly, Constructs get more use out of ore than other factions do. Whatever faction you choose, their research will give you unique strengths that you'll want to use to maximize your playstyle. The fifth action you can take is Expand. By spending food, you can choose a territory you control that contains exactly one army, place a second one in that space. The cost is equal to the number of armies that you'll control after the action is completed. The sixth action is Trade. Trading allows a player to choose a resource reduced by any number, then pick a second resource to increase by the same amount, thus mitigating the dangers of being locked out of a resource. Finally, if another player chooses an action you do not wish to take, you may instead harvest. When you harvest, you look at all the territories you control. For each mountain, you gain 1 ore. For each field, you gain 1 food. For each forest, you gain 1 mana. And for each ruins, you may choose 1 resource of any type. Capital cities do not gather resources. However, their purpose will be made clear when we get to Endgame Scoring. On the subject of ruins, we do have the one and only rule that had to be changed to make the ultra-tiny version of the game work. In the original version of the game, when you moved an army into the ruins, you would lay it down, at which point it could harvest resources from the space, but it could not move. Using a patrol action, you would be able to stand it back up. You would no longer be able to harvest, but would be able to move out of the space with a patrol or quest action as normal. However, in the ultra-tiny version, armies are represented by cubes, and all 6 sides are identical, so you can't really tell when it's standing up. So instead, the rules are simplified. You can leave the ruins only when you are the player that selects a patrol or quest action. I've put it off long enough, it's time to take a look at combat. When 2 opposing armies meet, a war immediately breaks out. Each player secretly chooses a value from 0 to 11, showing how much they're willing to pay in the war. This is represented by turning your war die in the original version, or by placing your cube along the war track in the ultra-tiny version. Once both players have decided how much they're willing to bid, they reveal simultaneously. Both players then pay resources to match their bid. Ore counts as 1 point, and mana counts as 2. They can use either or both types of resources to match this cost, but it must be paid in full. After that, whomever has the higher value wins the war, with the defender winning ties. When a player loses, they either lose their army and return it to the reserve, or they may pay food equal to the number of armies they currently control to retreat it to a friendly or empty adjacent region. If both players choose not to spend any resources on the war, then instead an alliance is formed. This allows both armies to peacefully coexist in the region and protects it from all other players. Alliances last indefinitely, but players must be wary. Whenever another pair of their armies meet, they must once again engage in this bid. And if either player decides to backstab the other, then all their armies currently in an alliance are affected, forcing them to retreat or even lose multiple armies at once. The endgame can be triggered when one of 3 conditions is met. Whenever any player has reached the top level of their research track, constructed the final level of their tower, or fielded their 7th army, the endgame is triggered. And even if something happens to reverse the trigger, the game will still end when this round is over. Players continue to finish out the round, and once the last order marker is placed, and each player has had their chance to take their final action, the game ends. When the game ends, before scoring victory points, any armies that remain in ruin spaces are destroyed. They will not be counted towards final scoring. After that, you count up victory points from a number of sources. You'll gain points according to the level you built your tower up to, according to the number of armies you control, and depending on how far along your research track you are. Additionally, the top research level of each faction typically has a conditional method of gaining even more victory points. You'll also gain points for controlling any capital cities at the end of the game. 2 if you're the sole owner, or 1 point each if it's controlled by an alliance. Whomever has the most victory points wins the game, though the rules include no less than 4 tiebreakers if it's necessary to use them. In my most recent game, I had a 5-way tie where all players had 10 victory points. So yeah, they come in handy. There are some rule changes for 2 or 5 players that I won't go into here, but I will say that I find the experience enjoyable anywhere in the range from 1v1 up to a full house of 5. However, like all Tiny Epic titles, Tiny Epic Kingdoms has a solo mode. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I've never been fond of their solo variants. I have nothing against solo games. I actually quite enjoy pulling out Sentinels of Multiverse, Kings of Israel, or Heroes of Tyranoth and playing around by myself. However, in all 3 Tiny Epic titles that I own, reading your opponents and predicting what they're going to do is a major part in the game. But in the solo modes, your opponents act in randomized fashion. It feels like the solo mode takes away the planning and foresight that makes them enjoyable and replaces it with luck. I really do enjoy this game, but if you're looking primarily for a solo experience, I would recommend you try and find it elsewhere. To sum it up, Tiny Epic Kingdoms, be it the original or ultra tiny version, is a great game. The Tiny Epic series are known for being great budget buys, and it really shines through here. You have a lot of variety in the approaches you can take, and it really rewards thinking about your moves. It's a great medium weight game that can be played in about an hour and really does achieve its goal of feeling like a big box game in a tiny, or ultra tiny, package. While they had to downgrade the components for the ultra tiny version, it faithfully recreates the game in such a small package that I never go to game night without it. All in all, I find Tiny Epic Kingdoms to be worthy of a 7.6 out of 10. Then there's the Tabletop Simulator DLC. The DLC faithfully recreates the game and even includes the Heroes Call expansion. This is a review of the base game, but I can definitely say that the expansion adds a lot of new features, including a new resource, doubling the number of factions, and even including heroes in a new endgame condition as a result of them. The components are all faithfully recreated, but I do have a few qualms with the DLC. Admittedly, most of them minor, but I still feel they need addressing. First and foremost, the war dice. They have these hidden zones for the war dice, but there's no way to cleanly reveal them. You just have to pull them out from the hidden zone and trust your opponent didn't change theirs at the last second. Secondly, what is with this background? Tiny Epic Kingdoms is not some grim dark game. This isn't Warhammer or Dark Souls. Give me something that better reflects the tone of the game itself. And finally, the snap points for the research track forces the token upside down. Yeah, I know I'm nitpicking, but it still seems to lack professionalism, especially since this is a paid DLC. In the end, it's a passable DLC, and I'm not expecting every Tabletop Simulator DLC to be the quality of Zia, especially since most of them don't have its price tag. However, I do feel that more effort could have been put into this. Still, it's Tiny Epic Kingdoms, and if you already have Tabletop Simulator, it's not a bad game to pick up, especially since it includes the Heroes Call expansion in addition to the base game. If you do buy it, I highly recommend looking on the workshop for Joker's mod. It not only fixes most of the aforementioned problems, but it also makes setup and gameplay easier in some other ways with better organization and minor scripting. If you wish to purchase Tiny Epic Kingdoms, either physically or over Tabletop Simulator, links are provided in the description. I'd love to know what you think of the game. What's your favorite faction? Do you enjoy any other Tiny Epic titles? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.